While on my range, safety is going to be the primary target.
Man, I barely zeroed my weapon earlier. I am freaking out. I don't even know if I'm going to qualify today.
It's going to be great. Don't overthink it. Just focus.
Listen up. At all times, your weapon will be pointed downrange unless you're told to do so by the tower. All commands are given by the tower. First firing order, get online.
Ready on the left. Ready on the right. Fire, go ahead and get the good flow. Supported fire position. Fires, pick up your weapon. Fire, secure your 20-round magazine. Lock and load your weapon. Rotate your selector switch from steady to semi. Fire, watch your lane.
Okay. All right. Just stay calm. Take a deep breath. You've practiced this before. You know the techniques. Don't think of this as a setback. It's an opportunity. That's it. Breathe in and then breathe out. It's okay. Let it go. Just maintain composure. Don't get in your head. Focus. Remember your fundamentals. Keep a steady aim. Firm trigger squeeze. Keep a clear and consistent sight picture. Aim for center mass. Watch your breathing. Okay, here we go. And there you go. That's how you do it. You got this. You're in the zone.
Ceasefire. Fires. Place your selector switch from semi to safe. When you get the all clear, range walk off the range. Davis, 33.
Learning, 40.
Expert, 40 out of 40. Way to go, cool.
Barnes, 32. Martinez,
35. Good job, sharpshooter.
Look at that, she's not just a pretty face.
Who said she was a pretty face?
Oh.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to lesson 4 in this 14-part MRT series where we go over the 14 competencies of MRT. And in lesson 4 we're going to be talking about a skill called energy management. The idea with this skill is that in order to perform really well in any area, we have to have the right amount of energy. We need to have enough energy to deal with the task at hand, but also sometimes we have to shift our energy up or down depending on the situation, so it's appropriate for the task at hand. So that's what this lesson is all about. Now let's look at our bottom line up front, or the bluff. Energy management helps to build self-regulation. Okay, so self-regulation is the primary competency that we're targeting with this skill. This skill is all about recognizing where your energy is, where it needs to be, and then being able to regulate so you can get your energy to where it needs to be. Energy levels impact your ability to perform in your professional and personal life. Now, think about combatives, for example. So if it's time to do combatives and you're feeling drained or exhausted, I mean, do you really think you're likely to perform very well that day? Probably not. You'll need to have a higher level of energy so you can go do well. And if you have a strategy in place, a skill that allows you to shift your energy to where you need to be, you're likely to perform better, whether you're good at combatives or not, right? Okay, now our third point here, effectively managing your energy and performing optimally is possible, but requires deliberate and diligent effort. So we can train ourselves in a skill that's going to help us be really deliberate and diligent in shifting our energy to where we need it to be, so we're more likely to perform optimally. All right, now let's take a look at this model here. This is what is known as the thought-performance relationship. You'll notice it might look a little like the ATC model. So here, what we're saying is that thought drive our consequences, and in that consequence box, we've got 3 different components. The first is feelings and emotions. So in other words, our thoughts drive how we feel. Then we got physical state. So our thoughts also drive what happens to our bodies physically. And our bodies actually respond to all those thoughts we have. And there are changes that are happening to our bodies. So those feelings and emotions and those changes in our physical state, those influence how well we can perform on any given day. That's the thought-performance relationship. Now, where do you think we have some control in this model? If you said thoughts, that's absolutely correct. And that's what this resiliency training is all about, all right? We have some control and influence over the thoughts we have. We're going to really focus on that in some of the other skills, some of the other lessons in this program. But today we're going to focus somewhere else in this model. Where else do you think we have some control? If you say physical state, that is also correct. Now let's just say if you were really anxious or really worked up about something and I told you, hey, calm down really quick. Quickly think to yourself, what would you do? It could be anything like take some deep breaths or have a woo-saw moment, right? You see, you have some control over your physical state. And today you'll be learning a skill that can be really effective at helping you control that very quickly, probably more so than just taking some deep breaths. Okay, now let's take a more in-depth look at the relationship between energy activation, meaning how much energy our bodies are activating for us and how well we can perform, okay? So the quality of performance. Let's start on the bottom left of this energy activation spectrum. So if I have a performance to engage in today and I just don't care, it doesn't mean that much to me, there's not much on the line, right? My body's not going to activate that much energy. And what often happens is when we have too little energy activated, we don't perform very well. A good example, a PT test. Let's say, whatever, I don't care. And I'm not going to perform very well, obviously, because it's very little energy. Makes sense. Okay, now, pushing to the other extreme or the other side of the spectrum, if this performance really matters to me or you, and I really wanted to do well, if there's a lot on the line here, my body's likely to overcompensate and overactivate in terms of energy. What often happens there is that with too much energy, we actually don't perform well either. We can't control or contain the energy to perform well. A good example of this, let's say you're doing a live fire, right? And you're too excited about it and you're just jumping ahead of everyone. You're jumping ahead of the plan. Worst comes to worst, things could go sideways. Now let's take a look in the middle of the spectrum. What's going on here is that I want to do well in this performance. It matters to me, but I've also prepared. I know I'm ready for this, and my body appropriately activates the right amount of energy for the performance at hand, okay? So what happens there is when we've got that right amount of energy, that's when we have optimal performances. So what we need to be able to do is, if I find myself with too little energy or too much energy being activated, I need to have a strategy in place in order to shift back into the middle. Now let's talk about one more thing before we leave this inverted U model. As we move across the energy activation spectrum, as we start to activate energy to perform, we might interpret those physical changes as us being nervous. I'm sure we've all experienced being nervous at some point in our life, right? Could have even been today, I don't know. But so think to yourself, what happens to you? What physical changes happen to you when you're nervous? It could be that you start shaking, maybe you start sweating, stuttering, maybe your heart's racing, or even your breathing patterns changes. So here's the thing. Our bodies change in ways that we are actually designed to help us perform well. So now let's talk about those physical changes, right? These mysterious physical changes and how those are set up to help us perform better, to help us out for success. First, let's start with the breathing and the heart rate increase, right? If I start breathing faster, I'm getting more oxygen, and oxygen is fuel. Naturally, oxygen is fuel for your body. So I'm fueling my body. My heart starts pounding so that I can circulate that oxygen to the major muscle groups quickly. And this is very helpful. Now, these next ones are all related to the digestive system, okay? Your body and your brain realize, hey, if it's go time, I don't need to be worried about digestion right now. Let's take those resources and put them towards performance. So what happens is at first, your mouth might dry out, or cotton mouth, in other words. That's why there's a cotton mouth on the green figure face right here. So we're getting a little crafty here. So you don't need saliva because you don't need to be breaking down food right now. Now your stomach decides, hey, let's hit the eject button. Everything's got to go. So one way or another, we've got to go pee or poop, bottom line. Vomit, represented by the bucket here. Everything seems to be going out, and you're left with just acid in your stomach, which is butterflies. It gives you that nauseous feelings. So getting rid of all that food in your body, you think that'll help your performance? Sure. You might feel uncomfortable, but it's designed to help you. Now we have shaking and sweating. The shaking, that's your central nervous system in advance of your performance. It kind of kicks it into high gear so those connections are in rapid fire. That'll help you perform well. And the sweating, that's your body kicking on the air conditioning in advance of the performance, again, designed to help you perform well. But there's the thing. While these things are good in terms of helping you perform optimally, we can interpret them in a way that talks us out of the benefits. Again, I'm sure we can all agree we've been nervous before and had a thought along the lines of, this isn't going to be good. This means I'm not prepared, right? The good news is that I've been caught up in those moments, in those situations myself. Once we think that, right, the moment, the nerves get the best of us, and it kind of pushes us over to the far overactivated end in the inverted U, which we just looked at a second ago. So now we're likely to not have a well performance. But if we can interpret these things in an effective, deliberate way, If we could say, hey, this is uncomfortable, but this is what my body is supposed to do. That allows me to stay calm and not get overly anxious, and to stay right in the center of the inverted U, where I'll likely perform well. Just remember, it's okay to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. All right, moving on. From there, before we begin to talk about what the skill of deliberate breathing is, that's going to help us manage and shift our energy effectively, let's talk about the benefits. We have two different sets of benefits that we'll talk about. First, the recovery benefits. So if you start using this skill on a daily basis and practicing it every day, here are the benefits you'll get. First, deliberate breathing induces relaxation response. And the relaxation response is just a state in which our bodies are working so efficiently that we're not wasting energy. We're actually conserving it. Deliberate breathing promotes ATP synthesis. This is just a fancy way of saying our muscles will get more energy. Deliberate breathing reduces blood lactate. This is why after a tough workout, the next day you feel sore the next day or two, right? Sometimes 3. So deliberate breathing also helps in reducing that soreness. Deliberate breathing restores energy. So if we're getting more oxygen in our body and circulated out into our muscles, we're actually going to be energizing ourselves. Again, oxygen is our fuel. Next one, deliberate breathing increases healing and daily recovery. By inducing the relaxation response and turning off the fight or flight, we're actually allowing ourselves to heal faster, whether that be from injury or illness, surgery, or just from daily life. Deliberate breathing can also help us to manage pain. So if I practice deliberate breathing, I can feel less pain in my body. I can distract myself from that pain, believe it or not. Deliberate breathing also helps with reducing anxiety and depression. There's actually some research out there that says, hey, if I do deliberate breathing every once in a while, that'll reduce the symptoms of anxiety and depression. And the last one we have here is that it relieves insomnia. So if you do some deliberate breathing right before falling asleep, you actually tend to fall asleep quickly, most likely. So lots of benefits in terms of recovery, kind of longer term benefits, but we also have specific performance benefits. And what I mean by this is right before I'm going to engage in some performance, I'm going to go do some deliberate breathing. So here are the ways it's going to improve my self-performance. It'll give me greater precision, accuracy, and motor control. So I'm going to be more in control of my muscles and my muscle movements. Examples of this specific performance where this might be helpful can be, let's say, during a qualification range. So while exercising trigger squeeze, you have to be in control of your muscle movements in order to maintain accuracy. Makes sense. All right, so if I do deliberate breathing, it's also going to enhance my ability to memorize information as well as to recover information. So what this means is that it can be helpful before taking an exam or pitching a module or anything that requires information processing, so as if you're going into a classroom kind of setting. Deliberate breathing enhances composure, poise, and self-control. This means it can be helpful when giving a class or when you're getting yelled at, perhaps by, for example, a spouse, right? Who likes to be yelled at by your spouse? Maybe you're getting yelled at by your leadership or your boss. It's important to maintain some composure so you don't lash out at an individual. All right, next. Deliberate breathing enhances concentration and mental agility. This can be helpful in a combat situation where your anxiety falls on the wrong side of the spectrum. This is where we would need perhaps a contingency plan. Figure out, hey, I need to be mentally agile. I need to switch gears. Something's not going right. Some deliberate breathing will help there too. And lastly, deliberate breathing improves reaction time. For example, in front of a promotion board, being able to quickly come up with answers on the spot. All right, that's a big one. So again, lots of different benefits, both in terms of recovery as well as specific performance benefits, all from just breathing deliberately. Now let's talk about what this skill really is, what it looks like, right? Because I keep mentioning deliberate breathing. Here we got 3 components of deliberate breathing. The first is to gain control. And the way we do that is by relaxing our muscles and controlling our breathing. So as you engage in this skill and practice it, you're going to sit up on your chair, right? Just like you are right now, or wherever you are. Just sit up on your chair or stand up, right? But get as comfortable as possible. Uncross your legs and your arms, and you'll start breathing slowly and deliberately all the way down into your abdomen to the bottom of your lungs. And what this is supposed to do to you is make your stomach move in and out as you breathe while your shoulders and your chest stay nice and still. This is the most effective, the most efficient way to breathe. Mentally, you're going to try to control what's on up in your mind as well. This is because it is not easy just turning your mind completely off. So what you'll do is get one mental target to pay attention to, right? Something that makes you feel comfortable, happy, whatever it is. The idea is if you get 100% engaged in that mental target, you'll get a lot less distraction coming in, all right? Because distractions will still happen. And when they do, you'll just have to be kind of accepting and kind of just like be like, okay, no big deal, whatever distraction. Now go back to whatever your mental target was. And the third element of deliberate breathing is emotional control. So specifically what you're going to do here is insert some positive emotion, specifically gratitude and appreciation, since we know those two are very powerful and it can help induce the relaxation response very quickly. Okay, so these are the 3 steps to deliberate breathing. You could certainly do the breathing just on its own, but you won't get all those benefits just like we talked about on the last 2 slides unless you're doing all 3 components at once. Now keep in mind that when practicing deliberate breathing, the current recommendation that is out there for you to engage when doing deliberate breathing is for about 12 to 20 minutes, 1 time a day. And your face says it all. That 12 to 20 minutes once a day just starting out is going to be pretty challenging. I get it. So I would keep the 12 to 20 minutes as your goal, but do it in shorter bursts throughout the day. That's fine. So maybe 3 to 5 minutes here and there, eventually working up to 12 to 20 minutes once a day as your end goal. Believe me, I personally been practicing 3 minutes once a day, and it actually does help. All right, so something is better than nothing. Now, sometimes we may not have 12 to 20 minutes right before, for example, conducting basic rifle marksmanship at a range. And maybe you only have 30 seconds, 1 minute or 2 minutes. You can absolutely use that short amount of time in that situation. And it could definitely work for you, but only if you trained up these skills already. Practicing a few minutes at a time throughout the day, it will surely work for you. So as we end with this lesson, I just wanted to reiterate that this is a skill that is going to help you manage energy so you have more of it. And if you practice it on a daily basis, but also in those performance moments when maybe you're starting to feel a little anxious, you can use deliberate breathing to bring your energy back to an appropriate level for the performance in front of you, right? And again, it could be for anything. It could be right before a PT test, right before a promotion board, or giving a briefing or anything. Okay, so always keep that in mind. But thanks everyone for participating. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out to me, and I'll see you in lesson 5.
Look at me.